I back up my actions, fact, don't ask, grab reactions, jacked attack with every word, then act with class as they hear me snap.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to talk about the Marine Corps, and a slideshow is not going to do them justice. We can talk about their gear, we can talk about some of their tactics, but in the long run, a lot of what they have is what everyone else has. Let's be honest here. The Marine Corps is the redheaded stepchild of the U.S. military. They're Uncle Sam's misguided children, as they've named themselves. The U.S. Marine Corps has a long and storied history. They've existed as long as the U.S. Navy. The entire reason for a Marine or Marine Corps is as naval infantry, because the Navy can do whatever it wants on the seas. But when it came to time to take a port or secure an area, they needed infantry. When it came time to take another ship, they needed infantry. They needed men with guns who had no problem getting their hands dirty, getting close with somebody. And that's where the Marines came from. Today, it's still somewhat the same story. You have your fleet Marines, and then you have your expeditionary Marines. You have, well, they do a bit of everything. And for the past 20 to 25 years, I'd say that while they were in the scope of their mission set, acting as, additional forces in Afghanistan or Iraq, the truth is that the Marines weren't always used properly, in my opinion. We were using them as a pocket army. They're not the army. Their mission is completely different from my mission when I was a soldier. So in Afghanistan, they held Helmand province, and they held it like the tenacious bastards that they've always been and always will continue to be. However, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, as well as many of the incoming staff from the Trump administration, believe that the Marines should be used differently. They're redefining their mission set. I don't disagree with this at all. Because to take a Marine and tell him you're playing soldier now, at least to me, and once again, I'm not a Marine, it seems insulting. The Marine Corps are some tough, hard bastards who you could put out in the middle of nowhere and they will still thrive. When you take a look at the assets the Marine Corps has, they've run the Harrier forever. They have their own logistics chains, and oftentimes they are supplemented by the Navy, yes, because they technically fall under Department of the Navy. They also can do anything and everything by themselves, where the Army doesn't go to war without planes and trucks full of supplies. Marines go there and then worry about it later. A lot of what you see today with the Marine Corps is men and women who join up and are now training for a mission set that shows the direction the world is going. While the Army is getting ready to fight adversaries like China. I don't really want to push us any further than anything just by putting it out in the universe, but we'll say like China. Looking at mainland. The Marines are looking at the same thing, but not mainland. They're looking at something island hopping. And it isn't to clear out forces on these islands like they did in World War II, with Iwo Jima or many of their other campaigns. They've more pivoted toward an anti-naval role, which to me is pretty awesome. When you take a bunch of men and women, throw them on an island in the middle of the sea and say, stop all ships coming through. A lot of us are sitting here going, ship's massive. That's just a floating island of metal. And yet the Marine Corps, instead of complaining about it, instead of trying to get out of it or try to work their way around it, they are now saying, okay, well, then we have to change up our tactics and we need to change up our gear. One thing that they're looking at is, first and foremost, using the Navy, because if you got some of the biggest guns in the world, you might as well use them, right? And lasing these ships, in other words, using a laser designator to point at the ship and tell missiles where to go, or calling in for naval fires. Another thing they're looking at doing is having long range anti-ship missiles that they can quickly and easily deploy onto these islands to stop shipping from coming through. Typically, it'd be smaller ships such as a destroyer or a corvette. And in a flotilla, taking out 2 or 3 of those as they pass by islands is actually a huge deal. It weakens the entire overall defensive net of a small fleet or of a larger fleet. When you lose 2 or 3 of these ships, you lose eyes, you lose their radar, and you lose their anti missile and anti aircraft capabilities. So the entire fleet becomes less effective in defending itself. The Marines themselves are also looking at possibly intercepting trade and commerce going to enemy nations, adversarial nations, because in the world of war, it isn't how many people you can put down. It's the amount of pain that you can put on a nation, and a lot of that happens to be through economic means. You can starve a country out. You can prevent a country from receiving the pieces and parts and materials it needs to bolster its war forces, and you can stop it from fueling its war sources, especially in some countries that don't drill for their own oil and refine it at home. Instead, they buy a finished product and have it shipped to them. The Marine Corps has been looking at this, and they've started to look at some of their older equipment. We see things such as tanks being divested from the Marine Corps. What use is a tank on a tropical island? It won't be able to get off the beach, and if it does, it's just a hunk of metal. They've started to divest themselves of things like towed artillery. They're looking at ways of taking artillery, either wheeled or tracked, putting it on the beach, putting it in the island so it can attack what it needs to attack, be ships or even other islands at range, and then quickly displace onto another part of where they're at so it doesn't get triangulated and hit with counter battery fire. I have to say that when it comes to the Marines, they're some of the most adaptable fighting men and women in the United States arsenal. While you can give me a rifle and tell me I'm going on patrol or I'm assaulting a position, if you tell me that I'm going from one mission set to another, you're oftentimes going to have to retrain me. It just is what it is. You have enough personnel in the U.S. Army that you can set aside some to train for a new mission and then put them back into it later down the line. Whereas the Marine Corps is actually the smallest of all branches. Let's quickly take a look at how many Marines there can be. The U.S. Marines currently have 172,577 active duty members. To put that into contrast, the entire country of Spain only has 67,000 armed personnel. But the U.S. Army, let's look at my branch because my branch is the biggest and I love the Army. The United States Army is running 954,875 uniformed personnel, all active duty. Well, no, the Army is the number here: active duty, National Guard, and Reserve. Okay. If we look at active duty, $452,689. Active duty Army is 4 times the size of the Marine Corps, and it can actually grow. The Army has no cap, whereas I've heard in the past that there can only be a set amount of Marines thanks to the United States Congress. This is because the president has the capacity to move the Navy around as he wishes, as in response to the Naval Act of the 1700s that brought the United States Navy into being. Well, you can't have a Navy without Marines. So then the U.S. president has control of the Marines. To stop the president from having a pocket army that he can control at will, they capped the Marine Corps. Now, so you have a very flexible group of individuals who you can deploy around the world very quickly, very easily to take on a number of mission sets. And one of the greatest reasons for this is when something happens anywhere in the world, the United States president asks, where are the carriers? The carriers of the US Navy project power unlike anything else in the world. If there's a carrier parked off your coast, 1 mile of sea all around that carrier is now United States territory. So then, if you have a mile of territory, you have to defend it. And anywhere a fleet goes, there's Marines. So we always have an expeditionary unit ready to be anywhere in the world, given just a few days at most, a few hours at least, thanks to the US Navy and the Marines attached to it. And I'm really kind of regretting right now not doing the typical slideshow, but at the same time, there's not so much to show. A few pieces of tech that the Marines use is the light amphibious vehicles, um, and then Amtraks or amphibious track vehicles, which I'll just go ahead and throw in some pictures in the middle of this. Yep, LAV, and then that piece of trash Amtrak. LAVs being very light armored personnel carriers, 8 wheels total, not very fast, but it does what the Marines needed to do, which is fire support. So, give it its due where it's at. However, the United States Marine Corps is looking at bringing in some new vehicles. They've already started to transition over to MRAPs and the MATVs. They're divesting themselves, just like the rest of the U.S. military, of the Humvees, because Humvee is a piece of trash. I don't care what anyone tells you. It rolls over like an abused puppy, unfortunately. And then we have the Amtrak, which, once again, I absolutely hate the look of this thing. Corrugated steel, thin armor all around, but it can carry a bunch of jar heads into any fight anywhere. And they're divesting themselves of these for something a little bit faster, a little bit newer, with a little bit. Okay, coming back, what they're divesting themselves from the Amtrak for is called the ACV, Amphibious Combat Vehicle. This thing's 6 wheels, comes with a wave brake on front, which is pretty gnarly to me. And they're looking at throwing a 30 millimeter autocannon on top. So more oomph, less BS, and it looks like it's got even thicker armor to keep the guys inside safer. So really excited to see them using this thing to go storm some beaches. Newer with a little bit more oomph. Looks like they are replacing it with more LAVs, LAV 25s. And yeah, aside from those, the Marine Corps is also leaning heavily onto the multi launch rocket systems, such as the HIMARS, that has recently gained a lot of attention thanks to the war in Ukraine. HIMARS being a 6-pack rocket rocket system uh, that many of you, if I were to show you the picture of, you'll see what it is and you'll go, oh, okay, I know what that is. And it is a derivative of the. Let me go ahead and just get this up. I'm also running behind because on the other side of 810, we've been having some issues that have been taking up a lot of my attention. So I'm once again sorry for this taking so long. And then the USMLRS, or Multiple Launch Rocket System. Here is the tracked version, the big brother, which is the M270. It is very pretty. Okay, so we've talked about the Marines and their new mission. The thing is, we haven't seen the new mission in play yet. Uh, they're starting to transition to it now. So I believe here in the next 5-10 years at most, we will see the progress of their new training toward it. But you can't really say that a branch is legendary unless it produces legends. And there is a huge question of if someone is a legend because of the branch, or if the branch, or if they were a legend while in the branch. And I think the U.S. Marine Corps definitely exemplifies this. There's some quotes here from some of the best military leaders of all time who happen to be Marine Corps. And it doesn't matter what branch of the United States military you are in, you hear these men's names and you instantly give them the respect they deserve. Such as a quote here: "All right, they're on our left, they're on our right, they're in front of us, they're behind us. They can't get away this time." Coming from the Marine Corps Lieutenant General Louis B. Chesty Puller. And I think, given time, I should come up with a video explaining how awesome Chesty Puller is. Chesty Puller is the namesake. Well, he's not really a namesake, but he is someone that every Marine looks up to. I've seen, when I was in the National Guard, after I did my active time, we had some Marines that got out of the Marines and they said something easier. I think they just wanted some civilian life with it. So they joined the National Guard. You tell these kids to do push-ups, and then you tell them, okay, you're done. They do one more, and they say, and one for Chesty. Okay. Let's see. We've got... Captain Henry P. Crow. "God damn it, you'll never get a Purple Heart hiding in a foxhole. Follow me." And some of these are just amazing. "Come on, you sons of bitches. Do you want to live forever?" And that happened to be a quote from Sergeant Major Dan Daly. And if you haven't seen it yet, I'd suggest going over to the Fat Electrician and watching the video on Dan Daly. This man won, well, he received the Congressional Medal of Honor, of course. And I believe he was awarded a second one, or they changed the rules so he couldn't be awarded a second one. This was in World War I, in the wood lines of the Belleau woods. Belleau, I'm not French, I don't speak their damn language. And as the Marines pulled up, the French were withdrawing and said, "We're pulling back." The Marines jump into the trench lines and say, "Pull back, we just got here." A few days later, a telegram comes across the wire, and it said, "Woods, all Marines now." The Marine Corps has put forward some of the best leaders and some of the best fighters that the United States has ever seen. And I don't think that the United States would be what it is today, and our military would be what it is today, without the United States Marine Corps. Another quote from Chesty Puller speaking about using a flamethrower. "Where the hell do you put the bayonet?" Marines have always been a little sideways and a little crazy, but you have to give them their respect. Give respect where it is due. I'm sorry that this one was a little bit shorter, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry that it didn't have the general beautiful slideshow that I usually slap together for these. Unfortunately, like I said, things on the other side of 810 have been taking my attention away. So, next week, I have yet to decide what we're going to talk about. I don't think the Coast Guard is something good to talk about right now, but we might start breaking down some of the United States special operations units, talking about MARSOC, Marine Raiders. I think that might be a little bit fun. We can also talk about some of their missions. But until next time, thank you for tuning in. I'm once again sorry for the shorter video, and I will catch you in the next one.
Nothing to lose, cause I fought and felt the bruise. Now I'm not the one confused. Call the shots and they produce.